Scary.
Scary.
Eating. Look at the sea, the trees in the water.
At night, I think they're a little bit spooky, but they're not scary.
Well, look like they're scary.
Oh, yeah? Mm.
Come on. That's a movie. Scary. You walking in the and somebody is taking you and it's going to do big things of you.
Oh, no.
See.
It's okay. We paid to come in here.
Okay, I need little animal came to attack me.
I don't think a little animal will attack you, but maybe an alligator as big as my car, maybe something like that.
Well, I mean, I'd probably be trained for doing that.
That sound is what? Animal?
It's a bird.
Oh.
It's called a woodpecker.
Oh. I think I see.
Do you?
Over there.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of lilies there.
See, nice one.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cypress Gardens. Pleasure to have you here with us. My name is Stephen. I'll be your guide.
Steve from St. Steve's, that's a rock star.
Yeah, I am actually from the town of St. Stephen, so Stephen from St. Stephen. Eventually you drop the from, and it's Stephen St. Stephen, so it's easy to remember.
Chewing gum, getting a hold of
And I'll let you know that on a scale of 4, I rate as a boatman as a 3, which means I am guaranteed to bring 80% of you back.
Oh. The root. Not the root, but
Yeah, it's basically a root. It starts like a root in the water and then grows up and makes a big cypress tree.
See some wooden protrusions coming out of the swamp. Those are cypress knees. They're part of the root system for the cypress trees. They do not grow up to become new cypress trees, but they do help the cypress trees with stability. One of the adaptations to keep them standing in such an aquatic environment. Hopefully we'll see an alligator or two on our journey. However, it is not guaranteed because the alligators here are free to come and go from the swamp to the Cooper River or the back river, whichever one they choose. They always end up coming back, though, because unlike the rivers, nobody fishes here in the gardens. So the swamp is stocked with fish. So there's a 24/7 all-you-can-eat buffet for alligators here. They don't really have to work very hard while they're in here. To your right, you'll see 2 halves of the 55-gallon plastic drum. It's got green angle iron hot riveted into it. Those are modern-day trunks, TRUNKS, trunks. We use those to control the water level. We can lift those trunks up and the water will shoot down irrigation ditches. There used to be lots and lots and lots of those back in the 17 and 1800s, of course not made out of plastic, made out of wood. Because this, what we call the Cypress Gardens swamp, was the water reservoir for Dean Hall Plantation. In the 1720s, Dean Hall Plantation was owned by Sir Alexander Nesbitt, Dean, Scotland, and he was granted a little more than 3,000 acres here to grow rice. Rice was grown by the inland method as opposed to the tidal method, so a reservoir had to be dug to hold water so that when it was time to water the rice paddies, you just lift those trunks and the water would run out. Now you might notice, you may have already noticed as we've been going through the swamp, that we do have tiki torches, at least the bases of them attached to a lot of our cypress trees. Well, that's because from time to time, we do give torchlit rides through the swamp. Now the swamp at night is much different than the swamp in the daytime. The majority of the wildlife that lives in the swamp here is nocturnal. They like to be out at night. The swamp is much more active at night than it is in the daytime. Just imagine how romantic it would be to come out here with your special someone, the only light, because there's no electricity out here, and we really don't like for you to use the flashlight on your cell phone. That kind of destroys the ambiance. So imagine the only light that you have is the light from the moon, the stars, and the little flicker of fire from the tiki torches. You have to look on the Berkeley County government website featuring Cypress Gardens to see when those events happen. So I'm not really sure when the next one is coming up, but I can tell you that there is a more nefarious reason for the tiki torches out here. You see, every year during the 10th month of our current calendar that we use these days, I believe that is October. Every Friday and Saturday night, we give torch-lit rides through the swamp that have a Halloween theme to them. We will sometimes have people hanging out on the base of the trees. Remember, it's very, very dark. We will sometimes have floating docks that we will move to different locations in the swamp to keep the suspense real. And sometimes we do recruit upperclassmen from the Military College of South Carolina, also known as the Citadel, who have certification as divers, and sometimes they'll be in the water. It's going to be very dark, so you won't know where they are. You will not see them in advance. What's really, really cool about it is that sometimes they'll jump out and scare you. I mean, that's awesome. But I mean, you would expect that, right? It's a Halloween tour. But then sometimes, more often, they'll just be hanging out in a shallow part of the swamp where it's only about 4 feet deep, kind of hunkering down with just their eyes above the water, almost like an alligator would do. And then all of a sudden, they'll just slip one arm up out of the water, and then they'll grab you.
Oh my God. That scared the life out of me.
My favorite part of the tour. Make sure that you are up to date on all anxiety medications and possibly blood pressure medications as well.
Yeah.
Now, the plantation life here thrived for 4 generations under the Nesbitt family. That took us through the end of the Revolutionary War and got us up into the 1800s, when the 4th generation of the Nesbitt family sold the plantation. It was called Dean Hall, D-E-A-N, Dean Hall Plantation. The Nesbitt family sold Dean Hall Plantation to the Carson family. And Mr. Carson was an expert planter, farmer. He innovated the water distribution through the plantation, and Dean Hall became more profitable than it ever had been before. Now, as we go through this little area right here, my new friends, we're going to bump into a good many cypress trees. This is what the area I like to call Cypress Alley. The trees are kind of tight together here. And unlike, like, say, It's a Small World at Disney World or something, nothing wrong with that ride. I love it. But it's all mechanical. This, we're being rode by me. And these are real cypress trees. Okay, so every year these cypress trees get a little bit taller and a little bit bigger around. We have not yet figured out a way, though we've been trying, to have our boats shrink in proportion to the trees growing. But we have not mastered that concept yet. So every year this trail gets a little tighter until eventually we have to create new trails. So the Carson family controlled Dean Hall Plantation in the 1800s. Very profitable plantation up until around the year 1865. With the fall of the Confederate armies, the plantation life and the southern economy basically collapsed. So around 1865, this place was, for the most part, abandoned. Now, Mr. Carson had actually passed away in the 1850s. Mrs. Carson was a staunch Unionist. So when the war broke out in 1861, she and her children headed up north. The property was confiscated. But then after the war, she filed a lawsuit and got the property back. Her sons tried to revive the rice fields, but it was nearly impossible to do so because to run a plantation effectively, you have to have a large labor force. And if you don't have slaves working the plantation, you can't do it. So the plantation lands were divided up into very small tracts of land compared to what they used to be. Because if you're used to 3,000 plus acres on one property, and then it gets divided into like 100-acre plots, it's much, much smaller. Easier for single families to survive off of. If you have any questions as we're going, please feel free to ask.
In hurricane season, does this area get flooded? Affected?
Hurricane season?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, Hurricane Hugo came through here in 1989 and tore out more than 12,000 of our cypress trees. Part was closed for, I believe, 18 months while things were rebuilt.
Those knees didn't help, huh?
Not against I think when Hugo actually hit, I think it was a Category 4, I believe, and the knees didn't help with that. But pretty much from 1865 until around 1910, this property was, for the most part, abandoned. Now, keep in mind that back then, this was a water reserve for the rice fields, so they would remove any trees that started growing in here. So all of these trees that you're seeing, at the oldest out here in the water, would be started growing in 1865. Now, cypress trees are sometimes referred to as the sequoias of the East, because they can survive more than 1,000 years. And they can grow to more than 100 feet tall. Now, eventually, around 1910 or 1912, a wealthy businessman named Benjamin Rufus Kittredge purchased this property. Actually purchased approximately 170 acres of land here. About 80 acres was swamp. His plan for having this property was to have a private duck hunting facility. And seems like I was supposed to tell you guys something else that had to do with duck hunting while we were in this area. What was it that I was supposed to tell y'all? I wonder if hopefully it'll come to me before too much longer. Something about duck hunting. Oh, I do remember. I recall now. Yes, this is called the duck bridge. We're going to need to duck our heads as we go underneath this bridge, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh my God.
All right, everybody. If you take a look over to your left, you'll see a white floating dock. You'll notice that there's a V section cut out of the left side of it. And there happens to be a wooden heart right there at the tip of the V. And that's actually done by design. We call that our wedding dock.
Oh.
Just beyond that is the wedding garden and the wedding gazebo. We have a lot of couples that get married out here. Tie the knot, you might say. And if the bride and groom request it, instead of the bride walking down the trail to the wedding gazebo, or even being driven by golf cart, we'll put her in a boat just like this, a little smaller though. She'll be at the very front. And myself, Stephen, if I didn't tell you, or one of the other boatmen will be in the back of the boat. We'll row her out here. And the nose of the boat will be parked right there in that V. And her future husband will be standing right there on that dock, waiting to receive her beside the water. Very romantic. I do believe, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this due to copyrights, but I do believe the idea came from Shrek.
Or
Yeah, I think it came from Shrek, getting married in the swamp. Yes. Remember, ogres are like onions. Because you stink? No, because we have layers. That'll do, dog. That'll do. The water is so shallow in this part of the swamp, and the bottom is fairly sturdy at this point, where I can just stick my paddle down into the swamp, grab a hold to the bottom of it, and just push us along, almost like we're in a gondola or something. I think that's what that's called. So if you look around the swamp here, you'll see all kinds of lily pads, and you will see the beautiful white flowers that are growing out here. Okay, those are very, very fragrant. They smell incredibly good. Those are called water lilies. They have a very extensive root system, just like the cypress trees, or similar to the cypress trees. It keeps them well rooted onto the bottom. Yesterday, on one of the tours that I was giving out here, we saw several, gonna miss him. We saw several different, baby yellow-bellied slider turtles that were out here munching on the lily pads.
is that green stuff? Duckweed?
Yes, that green, I'm so glad you asked that. Okay, so, yes, the green specks that you see all over the top of the water, that is duckweed. If you look at it very, very closely, it kind of looks like the foot of a duck. Now, the swamp out here varies in depth from about 2 feet to up to around 8 or 9 feet, but the majority of it is about 4 feet. We do have a fairly young cypress tree that we're about to cross on your right-hand side. Now you'll notice that the cypress tree here has cones on it. It's a cone-bearing tree, just like a pine tree or a fir tree. It has needles. Okay, that means that this tree right here, this cypress tree, is a conifer. However, unlike most conifers, which are evergreens, the cypress tree is deciduous, meaning that every autumn, when the temperature changes, all these needles up here will turn a very, very dark brown into the swamp, and they'll fall off. Now, as those needles and other vegetation decomposes at the bottom of the swamp, it will turn a very dark, blackish looking color.
That's why it is very boring, yeah?
Well, it's black
See.
because there's a color in it that comes from I think it's mostly from the live oak trees, maybe the pines too.
All right, so I just scooped this water up out of the swamp. We'll pass it around there. Okay. You'll notice that the water is not black. Right before we left, this is what the water actually looks like. Clear, maybe a little bit tannish looking. Comes from tannin that are in the cypress trees. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry. I forgot my manners. Was anybody thirsty? I don't mind sharing. Everybody's okay? All right. Okay. Just want to make sure I offer. So Mr. and Mrs. Kittredge opened up the park in 1932, and it remained open and under their management until they were no longer able to maintain the park. So it changed hands to their son. He managed the park until the cycle of life rolled around and he wasn't really able to handle the management of it anymore. His mom and dad passed away. If you take the walking trail and you get to around marker number 9, you will see about a 35-foot tall stone cross. That will mark that you are at the Kittredge family cemetery. It's a lovely little place. We usually refer to this bridge as the railroad bridge. It's constructed mostly out of old railroad ties. And the foundation of this bridge is actually concrete. This was the bottom of this, at least, was the only bridge that survived the visitor that came to us in 1989. We had a visitor come out here to the swamp that was unwelcomed and unwanted. His name was Hugo. He was a Category 4 hurricane. And when he left, he had ripped out, we estimate, probably around 12,000 of our cypress. The park was closed for between 12 and 18 months. To your left, we call the, right here to your left, to your port side, is known as the lightning tree. There are currently on the planet 24 species of crocodilian that still exist. Of those 24, there are only 2 species of alligator. One of those being the American alligator that lives here in the southeastern United States. The only other alligator that still exists on the planet lives in China. Alligators are mostly aquatic, but they do spend some time on land. Alligators on land can move up to about 11 or 12 miles per hour. In comparison, the average human walks at about 3 to 4 miles per hour, so they can move rather quickly on the land. However, they cannot sustain that for very long. Now, temperature is very important for alligators, much more so than the other crocodilians. The other crocodilians and caiman could not survive in places where alligator, where it's the American alligator or the Chinese alligator, can survive. It just gets too cold around here for caiman and crocodiles. The alligators have adapted to the point where if the temperature of the water gets below around 68 degrees Fahrenheit, they will stop feeding. This is because the alligators are poikiliothermic animals, which is a very specialized version of cold-bloodedness. If the alligator were to eat when the temperatures are too low, that meal would stay in the alligator's stomach, rot, become putrid, and eventually, usually, end up with a systemic infection that would kill the alligator. In the parts of the nest where the temperature is in the low 80s Fahrenheit, all of those eggs will hatch out as being females. In the parts of the nest where the temperature is in the low 90 degrees, all of those eggs will hatch out to be males. And in the in-between temperatures, you'll have a mixture. Now, most people realize that we don't like to leave like buckets of still water sitting out around our houses and stuff, because that's where female mosquitoes will lay their eggs, in still water. I don't know about you guys, but as I'm looking around this swamp, I see an awful lot of still water. I've never been bitten by a mosquito out here, though. Not in the water, on the trails, yes, but not in the water. There are two reasons for that. One is, there's a specialized fish that lives around here. It's very small, smaller than a minnow, called gambusia. Female mosquitoes lay their eggs on top of the still water, and then eventually those eggs will hatch out to mosquito larvae. They kind of flicker from like a little straight line to like an L shape. Well, you see, I'll tell you a little story, ladies and gentlemen. About 2 months ago or so, I was coming through this section of the swamp, and I had an idea. A vision occurred to me. And I was like, Stephen, this would be a fantastic place to bring a young guy and a young girl and a white rowboat and, I don't know, 400 to 500 swans, geese, and white ducks, and we'll do a movie scene here and then build a movie around that scene. It'll be a blockbuster romance movie. So I rowed as fast as I could to the boat dock. Didn't even tie the boat up. I just jumped off and ran to the administrative building. I explained to my supervisors my vision, and my dreams were very soon crushed as they pointed and laughed at me and said that had already been done in a movie called The Notebook. Particular scene in that particular movie, the scene opens at 1 hour and 17 minutes into the film. Not that I've ever seen it. Okay? Okay, but 1 hour and 17 minutes into the film is where the bird scene from The Notebook is done. If you go home and you watch the movie again very, very carefully, you will notice, if you're paying real close attention, that Ryan Gosling, as he's talking while he's rowing, you can see his breath. Oh. It was February when that was filmed here. If you're into a nice romantic movie that also has a lot of action in it, I recommend the movie Cold Mountain, starring Jude Law, Nicole Kidman, Renee Zellweger, and the late, great Philip Seymour Hoffman. There was one scene that was filmed here. It starts 58 minutes and 58 seconds into the film. You will see Jude Law walking chest deep through the swamp. I know because I was here. The facilities where the filming is happening, because they don't want anybody to leak information before it goes out into theaters. That situation was a little different, though, because it was either July or August, can't remember, but it was summertime when they were filming that scene. The alligators were out and they were active. The snakes were out and they were active. And, well, for the protection of the actor, who was waist almost chest deep in water, there had to be several boatmen out very, very close by, just in case something happened. So he was a very, very nice gentleman, very humble. The Spanish mission that was on your left here on Patriot Island was interesting because when you watch it in the movie, this little spit of land appears to be about 50 times larger than what it is. That's the magic of Hollywood. The Spanish mission that was there was neither Spanish nor was it a mission. Talk amongst yourselves. The bottom was actually plywood, and most of the walls and archways were chicken wire and stucco. Across your way to the right, you will see a bridge. It's actually a wooden bridge that's been here for probably 60 or 70 years, but Hollywood covered that bridge with chicken wire and stucco to make it look like stone, or the movie The Patriot. And that trail beyond that bridge is where a lot of the action scenes for the movie The Patriot were filmed. A lot of the scenes where you see Mel Gibson throwing that Cherokee tomahawk happen on that trail. Now, as we come to the dock, I remind you that my name is Stephen from the town of St. Stephen.
Stephen Stacy.
There we go.